This is the topic school age, industry versus inferiority. And before we start, we would like to do a prayer for Marcus. So place your hand on your heart and raise your right hand. Lord Jesus, we ask you and we ask the Holy Spirit to come upon us tonight and let the Holy Spirit guide Marcus to share the word, the wisdom, so we can learn, apply, and share the talk that he's going to be sharing with us today. We ask you to touch the hearts of anybody who sees this video, who is here in this present in this meeting, and they will share also what they learn and apply it in their lives. We ask you all this in the name of your Son Jesus Christ. Amen.
Right. Thank you, Nacho. Yes, today talk in the book Healing the 8 Stages of Life. We are on, I know you said it's the 5th talk, but it's, I believe, the chapter 4 in the book. And it's school age in industrial versus inferiority. What is this stage? And this stage is in which children enter into a greater society beyond the family for the first time. And if they succeed in navigating this stage, then they are able to develop a meaningful social role to give back to society. And again, this is typically around the ages of 6 to 12 years. So the book asks us, the readers, if we remember a time that when we were going, at that age, when we were going to school, and ask us if we can recall some of the smells, like the Lysol that they would use to clean, or the chalkboard, the chalk, and ask us to go even deeper, and if we can remember the teacher, maybe that teacher that we had maybe an issue with, or one of our favorite teachers maybe, and also ask, do you remember that teacher asking you a question, and how did we feel? Well, there was 2 ways. Either we felt confidence knowing that we knew the answer to that question, or we felt like we wished that they would have called on someone else. And for every one feeling that we felt of confidence, we probably had 5 other feelings of feeling inferior to hearing, oh, well, that's the wrong answer. In this stage in life, we need to hear not only that you're a good person, but we also need to hear that we are learning well. As you see in this stage, as well as all the other stages that we've talked about previously, the real objective is to discover new ways on how to give and receive love with others. So we'll get more in here into the book. It says, at this stage, teachers, which Yoli, pay attention, for those that are in that field, it says teachers have a great power to make us feel confident or inferior. And it goes on to say how there was an experiment done called the self-fulfilling prophecy. And what it did is it had researchers come into class and tell the teacher, hey, we're gonna test your students and find out which ones are gonna be those early bloomers. And this way, I guess it'll help you in your classroom. So what they did is they, took the class, did what they were, their little research, and then came back and said, here, these are the 5 students that we know are gonna blossom. So what happened was, the teachers paid more attention to those 5 students and we're able to give them a little more time and a little more patience on how they wanted to do it. And they noticed that their scores shot up that year. So the teachers were amazed. They're like, "Hey, can you come back next year and do the same thing, for the students?" And the researchers say, "Well, you thought, we really didn't do anything. We just gave you five random names from the list. It was how you treated those five students that gave them the ability to raise their scores." So it's saying, that we should pay attention to every student in that same way. Every student is shaped by our those teachers' expectations and our expectations as parents, because we're the first teachers in that family. So it also says how students have great power too, to have influence on their teachers. It talks about a psychology class where where the students kind of train the teacher to, where every time he went to the chalkboard, they really didn't listen to him, but every time he went to the doorway, everybody's head was up. So after a while, he trained the teacher to hold his class by the door, thinking that he was doing a better job. So it's strange how we can manipulate stuff like that. The power of you know being able to show them um, when they're doing good or when they're doing bad helps them grow as children, as you can see as adults. The next little segue here says, "You were gifted but ignored." It says, "Unfortunately, our schools make it easier to feel inferior more than competent, and that we generally praise, the captain of the football team or their cheerleader, um, and tell the other ones, well, too bad you lost. Maybe next time." Well, it was some social scientists, Roger and David Johnson, have demonstrated that competition might not be the best motivation for learning. Um, and this is so true, because my youngest son, he doesn't go to a standard high school. He goes to they call it a STEM program, and it stands for science and engineering, math. I don't know what she stands for, but those letters. And uh, they don't have, they do have individual grades, but it's more graded upon their work in the classroom. So in a way, I don't like it, because I'm used to the A's, B's, and C's, and this is a different type of method. But I can see that his learning is like 10 times more advanced than my other two who attended a general high school. So it does make sense on how the learning environment is molded by not there's not so much competition over at that school as far as who's the best and who isn't, but they all learn kind of on the same playing field. It goes on to say how Thomas Edison, even after his 2000 attempt at inventing the light bulb, knew the value of continued cooperation. His discouraged assistant complained, "All this work is in vain. We have learned nothing." And Thomas Edison said, "Oh yeah, we've learned a lot. We've learned that there are 2,000 elements that don't make the light bulb work." So he's kind of flipping around and giving him a more positive perspective. And even when they finally did come up with a light bulb that worked, the minute he gave it to his assistant, he dropped it and it fell. So they took the time and made another one. And Thomas Edison knew that it was more beneficial to give him back that second light bulb for him to try it than to take it away and do it himself, because he wanted him to see that he was still competent in what he was doing, and he wanted to regain his competency in being his assistant. So our schools would develop, it tells you how our schools would develop more Thomas Edisons when they teach his attitude towards cooperation and competence rather than reward the most successful. Even if we were competent in our own way, we may not have been rewarded. So it talks about how also too in school, the school rewards people on their mathematics skills or their English skills or writing skills, as opposed to their music talents or their artistic abilities. Um, and that's typically how society kind of sees how we should be molded, but it doesn't realize that a lot of those those musicians and artists are very competent in the way that they think or the way that they're being. It's not necessarily having to always be about the writing and reading. It says that thus artists and feeders will often feel incompetent during the school years, not because they don't have gifts, but because their gifts are not affirmed in school. It says being divided into thinkers and feelers. They're also divided into intuitives and cynics. It said intuitive people, they dream, live about the future, and have consideration of all the possible questions even before the teacher asks them. And in contrast, the cynic people, they kind of live in the present and they take in all the data. The cynic is not concerned about the questions that the teacher has on the blackboard, but more about that no one has erased the blackboard well, the chalk is too short, and stuff of that nature. So when a teacher is asking an intuitive person a question, he right away just snapbacks the answer, where the cynic person, it takes them a little more longer to digest the whole problem. So the teacher sees it as, well, this guy's slow. He's not a good learner, and passes him away, knowing that they were both very competent, but they have both two different thinking abilities. So it says again, we can be hurt not because we don't have gifts, but because we don't have the gifts that the school rewards. And it talks about hurts in this stage, especially those which lead us to earn love by working harder. It says this results in two types of personality. They have a type A personality, which is referred to in chapter 2. And the type A person, which was to me myself, I find myself in both types, but dealing with my situation this weekend when it said type A person is not only heart attack prone, but also compulsive, petty workers striving to do as much as possible in the least amount of time. They like to do two things at one time, like watch TV and read the newspaper. They're always pushing the buttons to the elevator, like close the door, hurry up, hurry up. And as a perfectionist, one who receives many rewards for doing well, the type A person thinks that he must keep doing well to earn love. While the type A person often succeeds in school and work and learns to earn love by trying harder, the type Z person usually learns, usually in school, that he will fail at whatever he tries. So he has a tendency to not want to try at all. It says both type A and Z need to discover that they are good and their worth doesn't depend on success or failures. It says they both need the G.K. Chesterton's advice that if something is worth doing, it's worth doing poorly. And it says doing it poorly at the start will lead, I wanted to know, kind of like what do they actually mean by that? And it says doing it poorly at the start will lead to doing it better as you learn and grow. And it just kind of gave me, for myself personally, these talks that we do for our ministry. Normally I'm the one kind of trying to shy away from it, but after hearing and going through this chapter, just kind of let me know that it's okay to do it poorly, but just to continue to do it, and eventually, I'm I'm going to get better at doing the talks and grow and learn from it. So kind of a slap in the face, like, hey, God is needing you, and this is where you need to be, Marcus. So, you know, keep pushing through. So I really enjoyed reading that part. It says we can also relate to God with the perfectionism of type A or the sloth of Z. We can mistakenly feel God is acting like a teacher or parent, loving us more if we do well and less if we fail. And it talks about how, some people like, want to go to mass or do good works, thinking that God is going to love them more, or if we don't do those, that He's going to love us less. But God's love is not like that. He doesn't turn his love on and off, like a light switch or a water faucet, like the example was given. God is a father whose sun rises on the just and unjust. So there's a few, and I won't read them, but there's a few um, Bible verses that we should write down so that we can go back and use them as reference. It's Matthew 5:45, and also Matthew 20, 1 through 17. The other one is like a mother who loves, and then we also have, I'm sorry, then we also have a mother who loves us, whether we are competent or incompetent, whether we have worked a full day or an hour. And that's where the other Matthew verse comes from. It says, God's love doesn't fluctuate, but rather we fluctuate in the capacity to receive his love. Sunday Mass and good works are not to convince God to love us. Rather, they open us to receive God's ever-present and infinite love and enables us to share it. Right. It says, while type A person is tempted to earning of God's love by trying to work and pray more perfectly, type Z person is tempted to dismiss the value of any work or prayer. So type Z will dismiss her ability to pray and listen to God in scriptures, to have a more personal relationship with God, or to even learn more about God. In contrast, a true believer doesn't rely on her ability to pray well, nor does she give up because she can't pray well. The true believer knows that God's love is an unearned gift, and she longs to pray even when she can't. So the gift of prayer that develops in Erickson's fourth stage is contemplation in action prayer. It says this action doesn't meet God in the form of prayer and then says goodbye as God heads to work. Rather, as this German philosopher Dag Hammarskjöld said, in our day, the road to holiness necessarily passes through the world of action. That means through our daily life, there's always an opportunity for us to give God grace, to give him praise, to give him thanks. It says, thus, the contemplative in action works with God to give and receive love while he works. It says, thus, he lives out Mother Teresa's goal, which I thought was very well. I've used this on my sons after I read it. It says, this is what Saint Mother Teresa said, wash a dish not just to get it clean, but because you love that person who will eat from it. This is the true contemplative prayer becomes aware not only by giving love by washing the dish, but also receiving that love. The dish and the food becomes unearned gifts from a loving God who would die for the dishwasher. So yeah, I used that the other day because my kids have a tendency to not eat and leave their dishes there, and they're, oh, that's not my dish. Oh, that's not my dish. And then so I started telling them, well, you know what? Instead of blaming yourself, why don't you wash that dish? Because knowing that next person that you're going to wash it for, is a child of God, and you love that person that's going to eat from it, right? And so they're like, wow, you know what? I didn't think about it like that. So you can use that one for your kids. So I thought it was pretty neat. Um, the the contemplative in action loves to work because work is a time of being loved, whether there is success or failure. And it gives an example how Jesus, teaching in the temple at the age of 12, models contemplation in action. And the idea of stage four, um, contemplation, is a trust in God's competence and letting God use our competence in loving God's people. Jesus knew that he must be about God's important work and that he could do it well. And all who heard him were amazed at his intelligence and his answers. Jesus knew that God called him to do special work, and he felt so loved in doing that that he didn't miss his parents for those 3 days. So it kind of gives a little breakdown of the first three chapters that we have been discussing through through the 12-year-old Jesus. This 12-year-old Jesus teaching in the temple illustrates not only contemplation in action and the task of competence at this stage, but we also see such actions build on the previous stages. Jesus' basic trust of his God, which was reflective of chapter 1, led to autonomous separation from doing only his parents' will, that would be stage 2, to joyfully exploring new dreams such as teaching in the temple, which is stage 3, and discovering competence in his industrious undertook this new work, which is the stage we're at now. So the contemplative action also finds his work deepening growth in previous stages. To see if I am working compulsively or contemplatively, it asks us as the reader, um, am I growing in trust from stage 1? Are we hungry to find our deepest desires and thus God's will, stage 2? Zeal to take new initiatives even after failure, stage 3? And do I enjoy what I'm doing, stage 4, or am I just eager to get it done? So we can try to learn to put those into our daily life, which will help us to heal from some of the stages that we have been talking about. So the next is positive and negative memories in the stage of industrial. It says how the reader, Shelley, talks about her negative memories from this stage. I know in a couple of chapters before, it talked about how her mother had some mental illnesses, and she just reiterated how she dreaded going into public with her mom because they would be at the drugstore, and her mom would just have one of these episodes where she would flip out on either the drugstore person or another customer in the store, and how just distraught that made Shelley feel, to the point where like she didn't even want them to know her last name because she knew what it was connected to. I said perhaps the most important task in this stage of the school age is not learning to do things well, but learning to do things well with others. She said that she had felt so much fear and ridicule and shame that she wasn't even able to concentrate a lot on being a good student. And even though her teachers would tell her that she was very bright and competent, and she said that she did well, even I think said skipping a grade, she always felt her inner self was there was something wrong, or she felt I guess she used the word paralyzed, um, that she wasn't able to learn as deeply as she thought she could. It says years later, I guess she went back to a classroom, and she said all those fears that she would have these waves of grief and cried for a long time because she realized that she was grieving all the crayons and books that she could relate only to from a distance, as a child. Bless you. The other, she said, painful memory from her school age is that she had was that she had this deep spiritual sensitivity that really wasn't valued in school. And this sensitivity, it was a sensitivity to God and to the goodness in all created things. So she kind of kept that inside of her, and thus she was not really free to learn. And then it talks about what were the positive memories that she endured or that she remembers. And she said her positive memories are the times at her grandparents' house on her mother's side, because her mother's parents were healthy, they were loving people, and that they were highly respected in their community. And she said that she can recall that the very good times is when um, she was sent to her grandparents' house for the summer, and I guess her grandparents had a beach house, and she could see the changes the next couple of days that she was there at her grandparents' house because of all the loving and caring that her grandparents showed her. She said by the end of the summer, she would be one of the most popular children in that little beach community, and it was just how different the environment allowed her to be open and free, and in this environment of love and social acceptance, she joyfully learned everything that she was taught. She said, for example, her mom, grandmother, taught her how to cook, and how because the love was there to do it, um, she not only was able to learn, she was able to become a very good cook, as well as her grandmother taught her sewing and knitting, so that she said at 6 years old, she was able to make like her own clothes. So not only did her grandparents provide a loving atmosphere for learning, but they also provided a home for the spiritual side of her. She would see, her grandparents were Jewish immigrants, but she would see how her grandfather would, when it was time to go to prayer, that he would grab his yarmulke and his little his Hebrew Bible, and um, how fascinated she was with, how prepared he was, and how he took his faith so seriously. And she said that even though she did not consciously know who Jesus was until adulthood, she said she thinks that the capacity to relate to him in contemplative prayer first developed as she breathed the mysterious presence that lived in the corners of her grandparents' home. So the next little sub chapter says, "Love brings out the most hidden gifts." It says that not only um, that all of us have hidden gifts, and it goes to the example of this young man named Leslie Lemick, who was born in 1952 with cerebral palsy and severe retardation. And I guess his parents left him at the hospital um, because of all the severity that he had. Well, the hospital didn't expect him to live. So they reached out to a couple of foster parents, Mary and Joe Lenick, and asked, "Hey, would you take Leslie in until he passes away?" Well, the foster parents were like, "Sure, we definitely would take him in, but when they come to our house, they don't come home. They don't come home to die." So, with that said, Mary and Joe, they were constantly showing love to Leslie, no matter what it was. had him there by the side. The mom was constantly praying for him, his stepmom, and eventually, they said for the first time that he would start to learn to walk using the back fence post to help himself. But that he was still very uncoordinated, that he couldn't really even feed himself. So I get when Leslie was around 12 years old, his mom, took him to church, and she said, she was praying like, God, I know that everyone has gifts. Can you please give Leslie his gift? So soon after that, she said that one day they were listening to music, and they noticed how Leslie's fingers kind of moved to the beat, and they thought, since he was interested in that, they purchased a piano. So Mary would sit there and play piano with him, and kind of put her cheek next to his, and while she sang, to kind of show him, that he can make noises. So then she said one night when he was around 16 years old, they had been watching, I think, Liberace on TV, and after everyone went to bed, they heard music, and they were, well, what is that? So they came downstairs, and they noticed that he was on the piano playing songs, and they learned that he had a gift, that he could hear a song one time and play it back word from word. So his gifts, finally led him into putting on concerts for other people that were less fortunate. Um, but at the end, that we all have hidden gifts, and they asked, the psychiatrist asked the mom, to explain his remarkable gift for music, and she just said, you know what, I always treated him like a normal person, like a person who had potential, and it was God who nourished that gift in him. So we're going to the next sub. It's called Healing the School Age. And it says, although most of us were not severely handicapped as Leslie, all of us probably have some sort of us that feels handicapped. Unfortunately, we can pray with a school age for healing, even the most traumatic hurts. And it gives an example of one of their friend, Ellen, who's a therapist, had a 6-year-old patient named Sarah, who came to them, that was abused by her older cousin. And it said how Sarah came with a little doll and was telling Ellen that, hey, my doll is angry because being touched in a way that was a bad touch. So Elaine affirmed Sarah's anger, explained to her that the difference between good touch and bad touch, and then asked Sarah to hold her hands out with her mother and the doll, and to see Jesus with her during this abuse. And Sarah saw Jesus standing on her cousin's shoulder and telling her in a firm voice, I want you to go and tell your parents right now. And Sarah told Jesus she felt stupid because she had been afraid to tell her cousin to stop touching her. But Jesus told Sarah she wasn't stupid, and that he was proud of her, especially for telling her mother. So finally, Jesus hugged Sarah, and Sarah hugged Jesus. So it's saying in this prayer, Jesus healed Sarah of emotional damage that is typically done through sexual abuse victims. And that healing prayer may have saved Sarah for many years, or perhaps lifetime, of being traumatized by the experience of sexual abuse. Even during our school years, we did not have someone like Ellen to pray for us in our hurts, but we can still pray for healing now. That she noticed that that people will have a tendency to ask if they're doing, especially with writing, if they're doing the right thing. And it talks about how they would use these evaluations at some of their retreat, and people were like, "Am I doing this right?" And there's really no right way to fill out an evaluation. It's just something that's coming from that person's perspective. It says writing seems to represent many of the ways people feel incompetent in school, as they never did it right. It said in second grade, this one particular participant in their retreat attended a Christian school in which her father was a principal. He said, Mary, so that one day one of her religious teacher had asked her to go to the board and write spirit on the board, and when she went up there, she misspelled it as sprite. And she said how even the teacher laughed and made her, humiliated her. Um, and I get it, that deep humiliation just really, really bothered her to the point where she didn't want to be an embarrassment to her father. From then on, it said Mary was afraid to write because she feared making mistakes would further embarrass her father. In Mary's mind, if teachers and her father would be displeased, then God too would certainly be displeased. Mary saw her father, teacher, and God and everyone else as demanding perfection. Mary demanded perfection of herself. So for the next few weeks through the retreat, I guess they asked Mary if she was willing to write again and to tell Jesus about all her fears of writing. And after weeks of hearing Jesus' love response to her, Mary shared her deepest fears about writing her second grade hurt. And it shows example of how when she did that, Jesus' response to her was, Mary, I understand the hatred and anger you feel. I too am angry at the destruction you have experienced. No child should be ridiculed as you were. Your teacher treated you so cruelly only because she was a very wounded person and had been treated cruelly herself. But I'm not like your teacher. I will love you no matter how many mistakes you make. So he kind of goes with that saying that only hurt people hurt people. And, Jesus was saying, it doesn't matter how many mistakes you make, I will still love you no matter what, unconditionally. So that is actually the end of my chapter on the book. I know it's still fairly early, and it's just the three of us. If you wanted us to go ahead and I could do the long prayer based on